Okay, thank you. So I have the task of getting you to drink from the Globus fire hose in 45 minutes. I am Greg Nawrocki. I'm at the University of Chicago. I'm also dual appointed here at Argonne National Laboratory, so I can actually get in the gate. So if you ever have Globus problems and you really need to discuss it with somebody, it's easy for me to come see you. How many people here are familiar with Globus, and especially using Globus at the ALCF? Okay, so about half. Okay, so I'll do some basics, and then I'll show you some of the more advanced toys we have in the box. So we're a not-for-profit service developed and operated by the University of Chicago, and we've got a freemium sustainability model, and I'll talk a little bit about that quickly. And the reason that's important is because when you're working with your collaborators, yes, Argonne has a subscription, Argonne has guest collections, you're able to share with collaborators. Do your collaborators need a subscription in order to use Globus? No, they do not. So they can use the basic capability of Globus for free, including setting up their own mapped collection so they can receive data from you. So that's kind of important. But just a little bit of history. So the development of Globus was funded by and large by the DOE and NSF grants. And that's all fine and well, and as you all know, grants are great until they dry up, and I can't come to you and say, use my cool service until you've got no grant, until the grant goes away. So what we did is we created this subscription model. What's cool about that is now we're self-sustaining, right? Our subscribers are buying into Globus, and that keeps our operations funded. So we are self-sustaining, and we're going forward, and we'll be here for, we've been here for 20 years, we'll be here for another, who knows. Yeah, so, and of course, Argonne is a subscriber to Globus. And I can show you all sorts of cool stats about Globus and how many endpoints and things we have and where we are and how many people are using Globus. But I took this snapshot yesterday. As of yesterday, we've transferred over 2.8 exabytes of data. So we're certainly familiar with the Globus, with transferring large amounts of data. Okay, so one slide I'm going to read verbatim. For those not familiar with Globus, we're a data management platform. We deliver fast and reliable data transfer, collaboration. We'll talk a little bit about sharing and setting up guest collections, automation services. I'm going to dive into a little bit of our ability to automate all of this, and hopefully it'll tie in with Christine's workflow presentation next. Using your own storage systems. We're not a storage system provider, but as you can see, you have plenty of storage systems at your disposal, so that's not a problem. Via software as a service, we've got a web browser interface that you can log into, get everything to work there. I'll talk a little bit about our platform as well to enhance that data automation. And using your existing identities. We're not an identity provider. You can log in with your university IDs, you can log in with your Argonne IDs, you can log on with your ALCF identity. So lots of different ways to authenticate to Globus and get at your file systems. Okay, so your own storage can mean a lot of different things. We saw that talk earlier. A lot of those storage systems have a lot of complexities to them. We try and kind of remove that complexity, right? Storage systems to us, whether it's Lust or whether it's GPFS, whether it's all these high-performance storage systems, object stores, cloud storage systems. Globus is Argonne is a subscriber to Box. How do you abstract Box? You can abstract everything as a Globus collection. Makes it look like one thing. Even your laptop, you can put Globus Connect Personal on your laptop and abstract your laptop storage as a Globus collection. So, yeah, so we make it, all your storage look like one thing. Great for you as a user, even better when you start to tie that into automation, right? You can automate things, it looks like one thing, a Globus collection, very easy to manipulate those file systems with Globus automation. As I mentioned, we support all sorts of file systems out there, including the major cloud providers, and S3 is certainly one of them. If you have some bizarre storage that's got an S3 interface, as long as they've written it to the AWS spec, it'll work with our S3 connector. But as I mentioned, Argonne is a Box subscriber, so they've got the Box connector as well. So again, lots of different lots of different storage systems visible by Globus. Okay, so enough of the introduction, and let's jump right into the Globus web app and file transfer made simple. And I'll do a quick demo of what Globus looks like to you at the ALCF and elsewhere. So I'm sharing my entire screen. I'm going to switch back and forth, and forgive me, sometimes it's a little strange because I've got the the Zoom interface popping up all the time as well. So it all starts here. Globus.org or app.globus.org gets you to this login page. And at this login page, you can see there's lots of different ways to authenticate to Globus. The ALCF identity providers here, the Argonne identity providers here, probably your university identity providers are here. You can, if all else fails, you can log in with GitHub, Google Identities, or Orchid. This is important, again, if you're sharing out to other collaborators that may not understand Globus or may not have a university account. A lot of times if they're corporate entities, right, they don't have their identity provider federated, so you're not going to see that here. This login pull down is largely due to federation through InCommon and CI Logon. So lots of different ways to authenticate to Globus. I authenticate with my UChicago identity mostly, and I've done that before. I'm going to just kind of go right there so I don't have to go through that process. You've all seen authentication to your identity providers. We do honor multi-factor authentication. So if your identity provider has MFA, we will honor that, and it'll go out and to your SHIB server and your MFA, and you'll authenticate and pop into Globus. Okay, so I'm just going to bring up the Globus web app. So this is the Globus web app, and when you log in, you'll probably get this view, this file manager view, this single pane view. I always like to bring up the dual pane view because I always think collections go back and forth between, data goes back and forth between two different collections. And if we go to, let's see, home, if we look for, I think I've got that bookmarked here, my recent collections, let's see, let's go to ALCF. ALCF DTN home. There we go, ALCF DTM home. This takes me to my home directory structure on ALCF, as it will you. Now, I've just been in there, I've been playing around, setting up demos and whatnot, so it popped me right in. Normally what I'll have to do is ALCF will say, yeah, that's great, thanks for coming here, but you need to authenticate, so I need to use my ALCF identity with whatever the app is here, and things pop up, the Mobile Pass app. So the Mobile Pass app, everything works, and you'll pop right in here. And you'll actually see I'll have to authenticate when I run some automation later. So there we go. So this is my home directory structure on the LCF file servers, and yours should look the same. Well, not these files, obviously, but you should get at your own home directory structure. So I'm over here at my, this is actually my MacBook. This is I've set up Globus Connect Personal. You can set up Globus Connect Personal to abstract your laptop as a file system or as a Globus collection. And if I want to transfer a file, I'll just select that, hit start, and away it goes. Obviously a small file, so this is going to go quickly. You can view the details of that transfer and view the event log. You can dig in, you can see it started, progressed, and succeeded. Obviously a small file, so it's going to go very quickly. But a large file, you can monitor that progress. This is fire and forget. So let's say you have a giant file that's going to take days, weeks, or even months to transfer. You don't have to stay logged in. Once you submit that to Globus, Globus takes over. It does the babysitting. It's going to monitor that transfer, and I'll talk a little bit about that as we go on. But it gives you the ability to kind of log in, log out, check on that transfer. And sure enough, if we go back to this file manager and do a refresh, there we go, that file's arrived. So very easy to toss files back and forth between Globus collections. Okay, so let's jump back into my presentation. Okay, so that's a quick demo of how to do a Globus transfer with the ALCF file systems. So talking a little bit about what we just saw, fire and forget file transfer and synchronization. You don't have to stay logged in. Globus does the babysitting. Any transient errors, let's say the network's glitching, Globus is going to back off and pick right back up. Unlike SCP, where game over, it goes away, you got to start it all over, or even an HTTPS transfer. Now we do have browser-based access for small files. We do have HTTPS access, so if you're sharing out with others that simply can't install Globus Connect Personal or can't, they don't have a collection of their own, we do have HTTPS access. However, it doesn't use the Globus, you got no Globus goodness there. You're not going to use the grid FTP, which is our file transfer protocol. It's very fast. It gives you roughly 20 times SCP performance in an optimized network. So you're not going to get that with HTTPS. But with the Globus file transfers, you get the automated resolution of errors, you get the fast performance, you get the ability to fire and forget, and of course, the ability to set those channels as encrypted. So very reliable, fast data transfer mechanism. And then of course, support for just about any type of storage out there. The other thing I want to point out is the files go directly between the two storage systems. They go directly between the two collections. Although you'll see we have our Globus service, this is what you're logging into as the web browser. When you do that, we're merely an orchestrator of the transfer. So Globus is orchestrating the transfer between the two collections. The data actually goes directly between the collections. We don't see the data, doesn't pass through us. So again, very secure mechanism of data transfer. Okay, talking a little bit about endpoints and collections. So Globus Connect, be it Globus Connect Server or Globus Connect Personal, is installed to instantiate an endpoint, and endpoints host collections, and collections are what the user sees, and that's what abstracts storage. The users interact with those collections. Two types of collections: mapped collections. I just showed you that when I went to the ALCF, my ALCF home, it was mapped to my home directory. So the mapped collection maps me directly to my home directory. A guest collection is built on top of a mapped collection. And what it does is it allows you to share out or allow others access to various subsections of that file system. And you'll see that when I do a guest collection demo. Okay, Globus Connect, let's talk a little bit about that. Two flavors: Globus Connect Server, that's what's installed at the ALCF, that's what abstracts the DTN home. On multi-user Linux systems, supports different storage types. It's usually, it's installed by an administrator and configured that way. Contains multiple mapped collections. You're using the same instance of Globus Connect Server as I am when I looked at my DTN home. Then there's Globus Connect Personal, which you can use to install on your local system, your own local workstations, your laptops. And it's single user, it's installed by the user, and it generates a single mapped collection for your laptop. So in that sense, an endpoint and a collection are synonymous with Globus Connect Personal. Globus Connect Server, a bit more complex. Okay, Globus collections, the mapped collections at the ALCF. We saw me go to ALCF DTN home. You can do the same. There are also, I believe, project-based collections on Grand as well. And Argonne also has the HPSS connector. So if you're doing transfers to and from the tape system, you can use the DTN HPSS. So Globus is also good for transferring data to and from tape systems. And I'm going to give my de facto spiel for the system admins out there. If you're transferring stuff to the tape, don't transfer a lot of tiny files. That's not the way to do it. Tar them up, zip them up, then transfer it to the tape drive. So don't transfer lots of little files. You'll probably get a call from the person administering that system. And you can find more at that URL there. If you just search in the ALCF docs, you'll find more about how to use Globus at the ALCF. Okay, I'm not going to go through an install of Globus Connect Personal. It's really easy to do. I always tell people that if it takes more than 30 seconds, you're probably not doing something right. So Globus Connect Server is going to install very quickly. The one thing I will tell you, you'll see an option for high assurance. Although Argonne does have the high assurance subscription, unless you need your laptop to be a high assurance collection and you know you need it to be a high assurance collection and it's managed under the subscription, don't check that box because you're going to be met with no joy and you'll have to actually delete that collection and then start all over. Again, that's not very hard. You can delete Globus in a matter of seconds. So again, very easy to install on your laptop. Okay, so a quick review. When you log in as a user, you're interacting with the Globus services. That's also what our various platform services interact with. And that's the orchestrator of the transfer. It uses a control channel to speak to the two collections, the two endpoints, and the data flows between them, doesn't flow through Globus. We don't see your data. Okay, just kind of talking about those two protocols. Globus Transfer uses Grid FTP, very fast protocol, very reliable. I talked about how it backs off on the network failures. It's really, I view it as a remote control for your data, right? You can sit there on the web browser at home and transfer data between your university and the ALCF. So it's kind of a remote control for that. We do have the ability to do, again, HTTPS downloads. I'll show that it's actually enabled on Eagle, and I'll show you the difference between those two types of transfer. But that's HTTPS, so the connection glitches, game over, and it's likely to bring great sadness for very large files. Okay, as I mentioned, Grid FTP, reliable, secure, and fast. So this is just one of the tests we did from the Research Data Archive to the ALCF, as it turns out. And you can see there's pretty good file transfer performance from Colorado to here at Argonne. Okay, so research isn't done in a vacuum, right? You're collaborating with people outside the lab, you're collaborating with people at other universities, you're collaborating with people maybe even in the corporate environment. So how do you share and distribute data easily yet securely? So enter Globus. Globus data sharing, no special treatment required. You don't have to create SFTP servers and provision accounts. Globus is going to take care of that for you. So it allows you to share with collaborators at any institution, anybody that can log into Globus, and you can see that's very easy to log into Globus. You can use your Google identities. You can share from your current storage. You can share from ALCF Eagle. I'll show you how that's done. And it allows you as an administrator to kind of move a lot of levers and kind of dial down who can share and what can be done. At the ALCF, they do it a little bit differently than a lot of universities. At the University of Chicago, I can take my map collection, I can just build a guest collection on top of that. At the ALCF, they go, yeah, okay, we don't want to do it that way. So on Eagle, what they do is if you want to share, you need to contact them and say, I need a share on Eagle. They will create the share for you, give you the access to that share, and then you can share that out. But it gives them a little bit more control over who can share, what they can share, when they can share, and when they can't share, they can close those down. So lots of different ways to do this fine-grained access control. When you're a collaborator and you're logging in, you're going to log into Globus, and you're going to see that collection, that guest collection, as just this, a Globus share, people call it sometimes, as another collection. And what's happening there, it's giving you essentially a little bit of local access, even though you don't have a local account, to a very specific area of the file system, to do a very specific set of things. Either read or potentially read-write. You could set it up so you can push data to it as well. So lots of different controls on that. And that's essentially as the guest user what you're seeing when you come in. Okay, so let's jump back into the web browser, and I'll do a quick data sharing use case. Let's find, that's the Zoom. Okay. There we go. Did I leave it up? That's the problem with flipping around. There we go. Okay, so we have, with Globus, a collection on ALCF Eagle, Globus Tutorial Collection. And it is effectively a guest collection, a shared drive. If you are in need of a guest collection, the nice admins at the ALCF will set that up for you, depending on making sure you have the right ability to do that. And I actually created I thought I did. There, I created an ALCF workshop directory underneath there. And you'll see I've got that's my slides from today. So let's say I wanted to share that out with somebody. Let me back up there. I am going to click on that, and I am going to set permissions. It's already set up as a guest collection for me, so I just need to configure the permissions on that directory. And I'm going to add permissions, and I'm going to share with, I can share with particular users. I can share with Globus groups. We have the concept of a Globus group. And if you look here in groups, I've set up my own group here, this ALCF workshop Globus sharing group. So if you want my slides and you want to pull them down with Globus, yeah, they're already up on the Slack channel, but I like to do this demo because some people like to pull it down with Globus. You can join my group. So if you go to this group and ask to join it, just search on ALCF 2024, the Globus sharing group. I won't do that now, but when I sit back down, I'll be able to approve your membership in that group. And now, if we go back to the file manager, and I'm going to set permissions on that, I'm going to add permissions, share with a group, and I'm going to share with my ALCF Workshop sharing group. I'm only going to give you read permissions to that directory. Another thing you can do is you can set up subdirectories under there. So let's say you want to share out with a bunch of different people. What you can do is you can create one guest collection, one share with different subdirectories, and then control access individually to those directories. I'm just going to give this group read access to that entire directory, add permission, and away we go. Done. So later when I sit down, if you join my group, you'll be a member of my group. You can access this Globus tutorials on ALCF Eagle, and then you can transfer my file to a collection of your own. Now, if we go back here, or let's go back here, and you'll notice here, if I click on this file, I can actually do a download. So the transfer, when we're up here in the web browser, throwing stuff back and forth between two collections, is here. But you can actually download it, and this is the HTTPS access. So if you click on that, you can download directly to your browser. You're not using Grid FTP, you're using HTTPS, but you'll be able to grab that file. So that's that HTTPS access. We get a lot of our support tickets. People say, well, I went to this collection and I can't download, it's grayed out. That's because some people don't configure their collections that way. They only configure it for transfer. So not something we as Globus control, but ALCF has opened that up. So you can grab those files either way. Okay, let's jump back to my slides. Okay, so there's a simple data sharing use case, shows you how you can share out with your collaborators. You can organize them in groups and whatnot. And as I mentioned, the way to do that, data sharing at the ALCF is handled through a collection called Eagle. You've got to go to the nice admins at the ALCF, and they can configure a share for you. If you just Google ALCF Globus Eagle, it sends you to a really nice web page to tell you everything you need to do. Okay, let's jump in. Let's talk really quick about Globus core security features, then I'll talk a little bit about some of our automation. So access control, obviously Globus, we're not an identity provider, so you maintain your identities, and your admins can maintain control over them. So if you are at a university and they have set you up with a guest collection, or even here at the ALCF, as soon as you go away and your identities go away, you no longer have access to those collections. Data stays at the institution. It doesn't transit through Globus. We've got identity checks of transferred data. That's the other thing. Integrity checks of transferred data. One thing I failed to mention is we do checksumming. So what you see is what you get. If you got a large file that's sent, we're going to do checksumming. If the checksums don't match, we're going to hammer again and send it all over till they do match. High availability redundancy, talked a little bit about that. And the Globus service resides in AWS. It's in multiple exclusion zones in the East Coast, so very reliable, accessible. And of course, any files that we encrypt, no data flows through us, but we do store some metadata to monitor those transfers, and that's all stored encrypted in AWS. We do have a protected data level, as I mentioned, the high assurance level. The ALCF has that, Argonne has the high assurance level. They also have what's called a BAA, so they can transit protected health information as well. So there's a BAA between Argonne and the University of Chicago, so they have that ability as well. So we've got different security levels of Globus, and the Argonne tier is the top tier. And so what comes in the box with high assurance and the BAA level? Functionally, the BAA and the high assurance subscriptions are identical. One just contains a piece of paper that lots of lawyers have spent a lot of time going back and forth on. It's got additional authentication assurance. I mentioned when you go to those collections, if your identity you logged into Globus is active, you saw how it just let me right in there because I had logged in recently. With a high assurance collection, it'd say, yeah, no dice, you've got to authenticate to me specifically with an identity. So, and also the re-authentication within a specific time period, you'll see those timeouts. Session and device isolation, you go to different browser tab, different application will make you log in again. And of course, any data that's transited, the encryption is enforced. Even with the standard level of Globus, as an administrator, you can force encryption. And even at the GCP level, you can say, I'm going to enforce encryption. But with the high assurance, even as an admin, you can't turn it off. And some additional logging as an administrator, it logs some activity on the endpoints. So that's what kind of comes in the box there. Okay, and the last part, what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about our platform services and our automation services and things that hopefully will make your life easier when you kind of work with your workflows. And hopefully this will tie into a little bit what Christine's talking about in the next presentation. And also kind of build on this, and it'll show you how it helps with the creation of portals, like the portal that was mentioned previously, and the portal that I'll actually show you. Okay, so when you think of Globus, it's lots of different services and lots of different interfaces. We saw the transfer service before. We saw actually the authentication service when we authenticated to Globus, but there's some automation services, flows. We saw the groups as well. Search, I'll talk a little bit about that, and even our compute services. So there's lots of different services of Globus and lots of different ways to interact with them. With the web interface, we saw that, but we also have a really nice command line interface. And anything that these two use, how they interact with the services, they interact through our REST API set and specifically our Python SDK. And so if you want to code something up, or if you have your own application you've already built and you want to do things in a Globus-y way and interact with those Globus services, feel free. We've got a nice model for that. So let's talk a little bit about some of our automation capabilities. Some of our simple automation capabilities is our timer service. You know, this is a pretty common use case, just time transfers, right? I want this transfer to occur in the future. I want this transfer to occur multiple times in the future. And you can do that in Globus through our web interface. So let's pop back here. And you'll notice if I go to the timer and transfer options, you can actually, there's lots of things you can do here. So you can label the transfer, so when you need to, especially this is helpful if you have lots of different transfers in flight and you need to go back to the activity monitor and figure out what they are, you can name them differently. I'll just touch on these. You can sync, so if you're transferring entire directories of information, you can sync and transfer things only where the modification time is newer, file size is different. You can kind of select different things here. This is for those replication, those backup tasks, right? And that's specifically applicable to these time transfers, because that's what these time transfers are used for a lot, backup replication. Things like you can delete files on the destination that don't exist on the source. Again, the kind of the replication services, preserve source file modification times. Who cares when it was transferred? I want to know when it was last touched. You can turn off the integrity checking, the checksumming. You can encrypt the transfer. You can force the encryption here, even as a user. Now, in this case of a endpoint or a collection that enforces encryption, that's going to be checked and grayed out. You can't shut that off. You can skip on errors, either file system errors. I mentioned, you know, if a file doesn't exist, but it got moved, we're going to keep trying that file and check some errors. We're going to keep trying that file. If you want to fail out of that, and you got multiple files, just click that. You fail on quota errors if you start filling up the disk. Again, we're just going to keep trying until somebody gives you more quota, so you can fail on those errors. And then there's filter rules. These are, you know, regex, matching your file types, .text files or whatnot, so you can set that. There are notifications to Globus transfers, again, very reliable transfers, very reliable, and it gives you notifications of failures and successes. I'm sure I have a bunch of emails already from the transfers I've done, and you can set that. But here's the important part with the automation. You can schedule transfers in the future, and you can schedule transfers to be repeated. So if you want to do, again, those replication backup automations, you can do that right in the web browser. Okay, so that's a really simple automation task. I also mentioned our command line interface. It is, it's actually written right to our SDK, and it's in our GitHub. So if you actually want to look at the command line interface code, you're welcome to see how our SDK works. It's right there. But the command line interface, I'm a shell scripter. I've always been. I can never remember what I do from day to day. So when I have my researcher's hat on, I always do things in shell scripts. And this is a great tool if you're a shell scripter, because you can call it directly from there, do a ton of automation here. Back before we had some of the more complex automation tools I'm about to talk about, I would do a ton of automation with the command line interface. I'd go in, I'd think, oh, I've got to code something up to our SDK, but then wait a second, the command line interface is really, really powerful, so you can do a lot in there. But as I mentioned, if you've got your own application, you want to do things in a Globus-y way, we expose our API and our SDK as well. Okay, so that's all fine and well, but what's the holy grail of automation? And that's to build automations with a managed service. And it's managed reliable task orchestration, right? That's kind of what you see. You want it to include all your resources. You want to be able to use all your different file systems. You want a nice execution-driven model, like a state machine, right? We're all familiar with state machines, probably one of the first programming tasks we ever did. And a nice declarative language to create those flow definitions. You want it to be reusable and shareable. You want some sort of service where you can actually share it out with others. If you're a lab manager, you want to be able to create a flow and then have others to be able to use it. And you want something, you want to be able to create an input schema for that, right? So not all flows are going to be, not all workflows are run the same way. You want people to actually be able to configure that and configure the workflows in the way they want to run it. And of course, extensible. If something isn't done in a way you want to do it, you want to be able to code to it. You want to be able to extend that service. So enter Globus Flows. Globus Flows is our managed secure, another service for reliable task orchestration. And I'll show that real quickly. It supports all your heterogeneous resources, all your different various file system resources, extensible and authorable event-driven execution model. You define a flow in JSON, you define the input schema in JSON, you deploy it, and it's available in the service. You can share it out for others, and it's extensible. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. So what is a flow? It's a sequence of steps, and in those steps, so it's a sequence of steps. It's hosted by Globus, so it's a service that we host. It's reusable, right? You're able to run these flows over and over. Very flexible. It's got that input schema, so you can write it, or your users can use it in different ways. And it's shareable. You can share it out with others. So again, if you're like a lab manager, you want to create a workflow, a way to do things in a certain way, you can share it out with others, and they can use it. So how to use a flow? Each time a flow is started, it's called a run. You can start it from the web app, again, the CLI, different ways to interface with our various services, our API, and even our Python SDK. So lots of different ways to interact with the flows, but the web app's the simplest. You provide input, it performs a series of actions with that input, and then you can manage that run, you can evaluate, and you can share, you can share it out with others as well, and I'll show that very briefly. So what's an action? An action is a special type of state. So as I mentioned before, flows is basically, it's based on a state machine. In fact, it's based on AWS step functions, and it uses the AWS step function language. So we're coded right to that. It's a great state machine, so it was natural, and we're hosted in AWS anyhow, so step functions was kind of a natural extension to Globus. There's basic states like the wait, pass, and choice states. That you can think of when you code to these various state machine languages, and we support those. But we also support another type of state, the action state type. And what's the action state? It's an operation you can perform on other resources and services, like your file systems. So you think about various Globus actions. Oh, you may want to transfer data. I'll talk a little bit about compute in a minute. Transfer again. We've got a web form action provider, so you can get some user input. You can go and mint a DOI with our, we've got an action provider for that. You can then share it out. You can set permissions, all with these action providers. And they're managed interactions. It relies on Globus Auth, so you authenticate and authorize to those, so very secure mechanism. And we have a set of Globus action providers, all the ones that you think might be there, to transfer files, delete files, make directories, list directories. So all those things you need to do to transfer files, as well as set your ACLs, right? To be able to set permissions on those files to share data out. And as well as various actions for our search service, which I'll talk in a minute. There are Globus provided flows out there. It's a great way to get started with Globus. I like to use this two-stage Globus transfer as a demo. I won't do the demo now because we're kind of running up on time, but I can talk a little bit about that before. It's a little bit of a contrived use case. It takes data from one collection, sends it to a median collection, then it sends it to the final collection, and it deletes it from that median collection. A little bit contrived, but you can see in the real world, you transfer it to that collection, maybe do some compute on it, and then send it to your final collection and share it out. But I will show you where that's all available. If you go to, let's pop back to the browser, and you go to Globus Flows, you can search on, look in the Flows library, Globus provided flow, there's our two-stage transfer. We'll click on that. You can look at the flow definition. So if you want to build your own flow, you can see how this one's done. You can look at the actual flow definition here, and as well as the input schema. And you can, let's go there. When you start the flow, you'll see that input schema here. So this is the input schema. If I want to run this flow, I can put my own information in there. I start the run, away it goes. You can actually share the run out so other people can monitor that. And then if you build your own flow, you can share that to the library and share it out with others and kind of control who sees those flows. So lots of different ways to mess with flows. We've got a lot of good documentation on it. I'll be here for a little bit. So if you want to see more information or want to see flows run, I'm happy to show you. Okay, jumping back so we can bring it home here in the next 5 or so minutes. So yeah, this is all fine and well, right? We're throwing data around with flows. We've got our workflows going, but we need to do things with our data. We need computation. So enter another Globus service, Globus Compute, right? So research computing can be daunting. You know, at least to me it is. There's different types of resources, you know, hardware specialization, what different types of processors run things. Where and when I can run those workloads, you know, that's pretty complex too. You know, I can't run them anywhere I want. And, you know, you think about the different users you might support. You know, if you've got researchers that don't understand high performance computing, they just want to get the job done. So research computing can be daunting. You know, you've got authentication, you've got network connections that you got to configure, configuring, managing jobs, then interacting with all those resources. And every time that's done, your researchers need to overcome those same obstacles every time they move to a resource. So we as Globus thought, well, you know, we've got this transfer as a service. How can we add compute as a service? So we wanted to move closer to the researchers' environments. You know, researchers primarily work in those high-level languages. So instead of compute as a service, we thought, well, let's add function as a service. So this function as a service model allows you to deploy your Python functions and use these familiar interfaces to do so on a compute endpoint, so you can use them abstracted in a Globus-y way. So it's a managed federated service, just like you saw with transfer, for reliability and scalability, just like you saw with transfer, for securely executing functions on anything. You can deploy it on your laptop. I do demos of Globus Compute where I deploy a compute endpoint on my laptop, or anything from your supercomputers on here at Argonne and the ALCF. So it's really, function as a service on any system. Fire and forget, just like Globus Transfer, Globus Compute, fire and forget. Nice uniform interface. Again, scales to any type of processor, and gives you Globus Auth, federated authentication, local access for control. So everything you saw with transfer, you can kind of project that onto what's happening with compute. So again, our compute service, highly available, cloud hosted. Compute endpoint, just like a Globus endpoint for transfer, abstracts those compute resources, just like we abstracted file system resources. We've got the SDK written to it, so if you want to code to it, you can do that. Security leverages Globus Auth, just like everything else in Globus. And we've now added multi-user compute endpoints. Before it was all single user. And that enables your administrators to set up the endpoint, just like, you can kind of do the extrapolation to Globus Connect server, right? Your administrators are setting that up, but others are using it with multi-user compute endpoints. Your administrators set up that, deploy the functions, and now other users can use that. So at the ALCF, this is currently under testing on Edith, and the goal is to actually deploy this to production infrastructure. Currently, you can deploy this single-user compute, and it's actually being used on Polaris right now, and I think Christine might dive into that a little bit more when she talks about workflows. So Globus Compute is something else that's available to you. Okay, the last service I'm going to mention quickly is data description and discovery with Globus Search. So we operate our own search index as well. It allows metadata store with very fine-grained visibility controls to that. Schema agnostic, you can configure it for any type of data schema, and then it gives you very simple and complex ways to query that. And so, where does this go? This allows you to build these data portals for search and discovery. And I'm going to drop back to my browser, and this was alluded to before. Here's the ALCF Community Data Co-op portal. The Materials Data Facility is kind of our poster child for this. So if I want to search on this is all using Globus Search. Let's say I want to search on experimental data. You'll see it'll facet down, right? Facet that data set down. I want everything from 2022, facets down. And I want to search on the MDF open storage here, and I'll look and I'll go, oh, that's the data set that I'm interested in. I'm going to click on that with Globus, and I'll say it's going to take me out to my Globus collections here, and it's going to show me, it took me right to that Globus collection with that data. I can set my own collection here and transfer data right from that. So that's a quick example and kind of our poster child for data portals, is that the ACDC at ALCF. Okay. Go back to my slides. There we go. So let's tie it all together, right? Everything we've seen here with transfer and compute in this kind of this cryo-EM automation use case. You could use Globus Flows to do data transfer. You could do some compute on that. So you transfer the data off, let's say, an instrument, in this case, a cryo-electron microscope, do a little compute on that. Maybe it's you then have to jump out to a human to say, ooh, classify this, or maybe select a centroid for an image. And the human can do that. Maybe then do a little bit more compute on that, send it up to ingest some metadata into search, transfer it to your final data repo, and then share it out to everybody else. So you can see how you can bring all these services into Globus and kind of bring them together with Globus Flows. The last thing I'll mention, we know about fair data, right? That's been something that we've dealt with for a while. Some of your collaborators, it may be very confusing. I deal a lot with these small independent research institutes, and you might as well as researchers, and this still confounds them. But we call Globus fair by default, right? With findability, we've got Globus Search that supports that. Accessibility, you've seen the way to transfer data, the way to share data out. Interoperability, add your Globus with flows and compute. You can kind of rejigger that data to present it in different ways. And then, of course, the reusability component, right? It's curated from acquisition to publication to discovery. You can do all that with Globus tools. Last thing I'll leave you with is some support resources. I am a good resource for you. So, like I said, I can come here on site and help you out in any way I can. Docs.globus.org, always your first start. We've got a great YouTube channel. We've got a nice help desk, support@globus.org, and of course, our mailing list. So that's it.